Well, welcome to this panel on deep tech and investments. We have a really impressive panel. I am going to introduce them just by name and title, and I suggest you go and read their bios on your free time. But we have Amelia Armour, who is a partner at Amadeus Capital. Gregory Bernstein, a venture lead at EQT Ventures. Inka Mero from the north of Finland, managing partner of Voima Ventures. And Patrick Sobocki, who is the director at Industrifonden. Welcome to this panel. And I'm Fredrik Carlström, as someone mentioned here earlier. So to get into it, the title of this panel is The Shifting Tide in Europe and Beyond, Why Deep Tech Now? And my first question is for you, Greg. Maybe you can give us kind of a 30-second history lesson of the investment industry, sort of the past of the investment industry and kind of what has led us up to today.
Sure, thanks, Fredrik. I mean, we at EQT, and I think more broadly within the industry, are seeing a shift, whereas really around after World War II, where venture capital got started, there was a focus on hardware and really not much of software because it really was just in its infancy and starting. And so what happened after that, as we kind of moved forward in the birth of venture capital, was that software really has dominated for really the last 20 years. But what we're seeing in terms of, and the panel you just heard in convergence, not just a convergence in technology, but a convergence in issues as well. Climate change, US versus China, you heard that during Herman's talk, people versus automation, all of that is creating a shift where hardware and software need to become more integrated. And deep tech is really the perfect place for that. And that's really the purpose of the panel today.
Thank you. So if we talk a little bit about the timing, why now, has something happened? What signals are we seeing? Amelia, can you talk a little bit about the timing and about sort of, the market and what's happening?
Yeah, Amadeus, we're a deep tech fund. So we, over our 23-year history, we have always been quite focused on deep tech. But I think what we're seeing now is a lot of companies which are mission driven, so people that are interested in trying to solve big challenges such as climate change and healthcare opportunities. And so that is driving the establishment of new and exciting deep technology. So, we see great graphene opportunities, quantum computing opportunities, and it's a different form of investing. It takes longer, requires more capital investment. But along with the ideas, we're seeing much more interest from funders and investors to back those companies because they see the huge opportunities and basically the huge market sizes that these companies can be selling into.
So have you seen anything change in the last? You said you've been doing this for 23 years. Is it shifted quicker in the last year or so, or what signals are you seeing?
Yeah, you see different waves coming through. So if you look back to sort of 2012, 13, you see the great sort of AI companies starting. And now AI is, most companies are using AI, especially, in some sort of way. And I think for our current investing, what we're seeing is, quantum computing is an exciting wave that is coming through. And so those are new investments that we've been making from the last 2 years in our seed fund. So I think you get these changes and new ideas that are coming to market.
That's great. So Patrick, if investing is moving from sort of software and apps, and maybe to be a little bit mean, but like some of the simpler things, to these difficult things, how does that change kind of the approach to investing? What kind of, has it changed your way of working? Has it changed the kind of people you hire? How does that look from your side?
Well, I mean, also for us, I mean, we've been in the industry for 4 decades, and we've spanned across software, hardware, and life sciences, the deep stuff in biotech. So I think we've lived this over many years. And we learned the hard way that you need to be a bit different when you look at deep tech opportunities. I mean, first of all, you're not investing on metrics. You're investing on a transformation that is often coming out of research. So you need to be fairly deep and diligent in when you're assessing the opportunity. What is that big transformation that the technology is hitting? And understanding the underlying technology, the science, and everything like that. So I think we need to dig deeper, and we tend to go about it with a more thesis-oriented approach. So really try and understand what are the transformations that happen in the industry. And me, myself, I come from a life sciences background, so I really like the computational application into biology. And you heard Enzyme before talk about that. So I think that's one aspect. The other one is, you need to stay really close to academia to understand research, also in your diligence process, to stay tight with these type of people, because those would also be the ones endorsing technologies when they are approaching market. The third piece is really stamina. You need to have patient capital if you want to be in this game. And you also have to have entrepreneurs with stamina, because this is not a flipping game of building an app and sell it in 2-3 years. It's a 12-year, 10, 15 years journey sometimes, if you really need to build the market, because that's areas where we are looking at, where there is not an existing market, but actually the technology is fostering and building out the market. So stamina, and also a different maybe set of people. Enginesign is an interesting example. Karim just spoke in the previous panel. He comes out of research, spun out his innovation. He's teamed up with a serial entrepreneur, and then with a really skilled salesperson. So you need to have a little bit of a different setup in the founders team and in the entire team that we also pay a lot of attention to. So a few aspects to it, but I think patience, humbleness are important key words here.
Two things that investors are known for: humbleness and patience. So to move to Inka, I want to ask you the same question, sort of the impact that you see from deep tech, both on the environment perhaps and solving these big problems that are facing humanity, but also on value creation. Like, what is your sort of take on this? How do you view the world, as it were?
So thanks. I firstly, I would say that the new era of deep tech and this global challenges that we're facing also possesses a huge challenge for VCs. I think we need to redefine our purpose as well. And VC funds are typically designed for maybe 10-year period of a life cycle, and you can't necessarily call that very patient capital. But for us, we've defined our purpose and mission as a first Nordic deep tech and very scientific centric venture capital fund, and we're kind of a new kid on the block, even though we have our roots in the research institutions and so forth. We've defined it as that our purpose is to solve these big globals by combining science, growth, entrepreneurship, and smart capital. So when it comes to on the impact and on the timing, basically what we see as of now in the Nordics and Baltics is that the most impact and purpose-driven opportunities, which are in deep tech, typically come from these converging areas, converging from microelectronics to biology, or from medical research to nanoelectronics, or in biotech, of course, and so forth and so forth, combining quantum or new materials and process industries. And in terms of a value creation, we've defined it through three domains. First one is really the team, which Patrick assessed earlier. Very typically, it's a research team which is more entrepreneurial in the research context, driving for a purpose and a change and becoming an entrepreneurial team. Often, many cases, they're lacking commercial experience, so this serial entrepreneurship matching. So concept-wise, what we're, for example, looking is to combine this Nordic tech talent with these purpose-driven deep tech companies. How can we get this deep tech ecosystem going? Second one is bringing on board global big partners. Only few of these big let's say, deep tech companies can bypass the ecosystem like digital startups did. Digital disruption in deep tech domain doesn't really happen that fast. So you might need to work with industrial partners, and how can you kind of bypass and accelerate that thing go to market is the key question. The third one is really capital. We still can't foster the big tech here in Europe. I think we need to really level up in terms of an ambition level, and how do we foster and fund our own businesses in order to reach the kind of a comparable performance to China and USA.
That's great, thank you. So we've heard now from several people that these types of innovations tend to be spun out of somewhere, maybe a different company. The company that I work for, Seeqc, was spun out of Hypress, which is a leading sort of chip maker. But we also see technology coming out of academia and research. So, Greg, how does that change in your mind sort of the way that deals are made? Academics are often quite weary of people like you guys trying to ramp things up and sort of commercialize things. How has that changed your dynamic, and how do you go about doing these deals, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, we're really newcomers to this in a lot of ways. I mean, EQT Ventures has also been around, since 2015, but EQT as a house has been around quite a bit longer. And one of the things that I think EQT brings, as well as to the broader investment community, that to your point, Fredrik, is around humbleness, because the tech is central to it, and the entrepreneurs are the ones that are really walking you through not only their life's work, but how that technology can have a massive impact that people need to understand. And so as we approach these deals, we really start with that by thinking through, okay, not only what is the tech and the team, as you've heard from Inka and others, but how can we put together a deal that also brings elements that the broader public can understand what this technology is going to be. We at EQT Ventures really believe in storytelling, branding, and market as well, which is typically lacked in deep tech, not because they don't have brands or stories behind them, but largely because they're more difficult to tell. Fredrik, you know this, being a creative director now at Seeqc, it's hard to tell the story of quantum to the average consumer. But I think as an investor, I really believe strongly in the power for it to transform society, and that element of it is really important. So when we work with entrepreneurs, we really want them to understand our place in coming into it, that we're not scientists, but we want to be able to have their story and the tech be at the center of that, and really take a back seat and be able to empower them through that.
That's great. So Amelia, many of these companies that we're talking about, they're creating innovation that it doesn't sort of fit nicely into an existing ecosystem or a platform. You're creating entirely new platforms or entirely new markets that is maybe 10 or maybe decades into the future. How do you sort of think about that when you get into a company? How do you invest in those types of innovation?
Yeah, it can be quite scary. You're making a big bet, on the technology and the market timing, and is that timing going to be within the life of your fund? And as a seed investor, those are the risks that we're taking. So what we try and do is evaluate the tech. Are we investing in the best people in this particular field? And then take a view on when the market timing will be, and will it, and have we got that right? Quantum, is a really interesting example. Is this the right moment for VC investing? And hopefully it is. The hardware is being developed, and we've invested in the software, and they should come together, and we should get really useful applications, within the foreseeable future. But obviously there's risks there that you can't control, and you can speak to people, you can speak to the end users. That's interesting. You can speak to the pharma companies who are going to be using this technology. How technology ready are they for quantum, for example? And then you see within the pharma companies, that there are quantum teams, that there are people working on this. And so you can look for data points that give you confidence that you have got the timing right.
But on that note, if you're investing in maybe a software, there's always the ability to pivot. You can kind of go from one thing into another. Here, this technology is incredibly early. What ability, Patrick, do you see in kind of giving companies the ability to pivot due to a market condition changing, or the tech changing, or sort of other conditions?
Yeah, I mean, maybe let me build on Amelia's comments as well, because we obviously are investing as well in life science companies, and in all honesty, we're buying tech, we're selling on tech. There is no single dollar of revenue in between, and I think we need to think about investing in deep tech in a similar way, and also taking the parallel of how biotechs take their approach to market. There are various ways to go to market. It doesn't necessarily mean that Enzyme in 10 years needs to have 1,000 crew of sales reps out there. They're already now looking at R&D partnerships, of licensing deals. And this is exactly what biotech companies have been doing all along. And that's generating loads of revenues and a milestone setup to also cushion the technical risk, as well as the commercial risk on the road. So I think pivoting for us, it's more a matter of when you're building a value creation around potentially IP, which is often the case in deep tech. We're more thinking about modularity of building your tech stack. And we see this across multiple of our deep tech investments. It's not necessarily a pivoting in your in your gearing of the technology. It's rather additive values that you build on top. And that also means that platform technologies, which often are cases in the deep tech sphere, I mean, of course, bring multiple values in multiple verticals. So once again, the example of Enzyme, they have a blue ocean opportunity to actually tackle many, many verticals within the entire chemical industry. They start off in certain verticals today, but they can go all the way to the high volume, big, fossil fuel dependent chemistry areas. And that's building up that tech stack and IP and value in that tech stack. So I think it's modularity and nimbleness in building rather than gearing to different directions. But I mean, you're absolutely right. The commercial journey, I think, is the one, Amelia, you're pointing to. It's a tricky one.
So Inka, this idea of the ability to scale, which Patrick was touching upon, and Amelia as well. There's one thing to sort of demonstrate tech in a lab. There's another to scale it up and start building factories to produce hundreds of millions of units or to really commercialize it. How does that change your product? Like, how do you think about that? The ability to sort of test in the lab versus making it work in the world.
Yeah, so many of our portfolio companies, there's 30 now in 2 different funds, are still in pre-revenue and tech development phase, but some of them are kind of in that stage of starting to build factories. Infinited Fiber generating completely new kind of fiber on recycled materials comparable to cotton, customers from Patagonias to H&M's. You need to raise 100 or 150 million to set up your own production. So what you need good industrial partners, those big brand clients, those customers who can build and bring you credibility and push you to the quality for you to then convince your investors and potential money sources that this project funding is worthwhile. Then on the other end of spectrum, you have companies like Solar Foods from our portfolio feeding CO2 to bacteria and generating protein out of the food chain system completely. So that's a big vision. That's a big tech kind of a company. And they actually are working in such a unique technology that fundraising for the production is fairly easy, but you're kind of the first mover, the big brand in the food tech industry.